Jim Mars is our guest for the entire program. I just pinch me. Oh man, a gentleman that I have grown. I just have a tremendous amount of respect for. I've read almost all of his books, I think. Although I've got to get that. I got to get Crossfire. I've got to get that. So maybe I can. Maybe I can twist Jim's arm a little bit if he's got an extra copy in his office. What a great patriot! What a man of. I mean, if I look, I'll tell you something. He's probably forgotten more about our occulted history, the nation's history, than I will ever know. A journalist, author, researcher, New York Times bestseller of many books, Our Occulted History. That's the big one right now, folks. Go to Amazon, grab that book while you can, before you know what hits the fan. Before we get back to Jim, I just want to mention as well, I want to give our best out to Pastor Paul Begley. It's my understanding he was in a motor vehicle accident and he was briefly hospitalized, although he's okay. Thankfully, he's okay. But want to give our best wishes out to Pastor Paul Begley for his speedy recovery from whatever residual effects from the motor vehicle accident. Of course, Pastor Paul Begley, a friend of the program as well, and he's got a great program every day. I haven't had an opportunity to reach out to him, but I will. And, of course, I'm flying solo tonight, Joe. My son, co-host, is... he's a gimp. He's walking around. Well, he's not walking around, apparently. He's we're waiting on the x-rays to determine whether indeed his ankle is fractured. But apparently his ankle is the size of a pumpkin, and we're waiting on the crime scene analysis to determine whether or not he indeed tripped or where his wife might have been. That's right. Now, our guest tonight, again, is Jim Mars. Visit his website. That's jimmars.com. All of the links are on the show description there on YouTube, BTR, and Global Star Radio Network as well, and Hagmann.com, HagmannReport.com. That said, Jim Mars being in Dallas, dancing on the stage of the Carousel Club, Jack Ruby's Carousel Club, a month before the assassination, awakened by his roommate of the news, Kennedy assassination. Jim, did that start you out in your just the infamous quest for the truth, or is that what really got you? I mean,
well, no, actually, it goes back further than that. I can remember even in junior high school, I was drawing little cartoons, I was writing little stories, and then I got to high school, and I ended up being a page editor on the high school paper, and I would draw cartoons, and I would take pictures, and and I've done that. And then when I went to college, while I was going to college as a underclassman, I was working for the Denton Record Chronicle, covering sports and drawing cartoons and taking photographs. And then I became editorial page editor of the campus newspaper. That's what I was doing at the time of the Kennedy assassination. So, yeah, I was already on a road to journalism. I'll tell you, if you want to know, here's my dirty little secret. I had already had such experience there. In fact, also in high school, I worked on the junior achievement program where me and several other high school kids were accepted to write and publish and edit an entire page for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, which was a major big city newspaper, and I forget if they had a title for it, but basically it was a teen page, okay? So we were writing stories, composing headlines, and that put me into, and we would do that at the newspaper. So that put me into contact, even in early high school, with senior editors, reporters, people who later would cover the Kennedy assassination. So, see, I've kind of been involved in it all along, but the dirty secret is that I even at that point, I had not really decided going to be my life's work. It was when I got to college and they asked me what my degree plan was going to be. And I'm going to confess that I was really bad in math. And I think the reason for that, Doug, is because to me, I cannot relate math to people. And I'm kind of a people person. I like talking to people. I like hearing their stories. I like trying to see how things affect people. And when it came to math, and particularly algebra, A plus B equals C, and it's like, what? What are you talking about? You know? So when I got to college, I said, well, what degree plan do you have that does not require any math? And they said, well, there's journalism. And I said, okay, sign me up. And so that's when I officially got into journalism. But as you can see, I was there even beforehand. So when the Kennedy assassination happened, I mean, you know, I knew. I said, this is a big story. And it happened right here in my backyard, happened right there in Dallas. I know people in Dallas. I know how Dallas is run. I know who runs Dallas. And so I began to pay very, very close attention and started working on that case, just like I said, 10 to 15 minutes after it had happened. Now, the thing that got me going was that whole weekend, and I don't know, you might not remember this, Doug, but that whole weekend, all the media was preempted.
Yep.
If you turn on the TV, if you turn on the radio, if you picked up a newspaper, you're going to read about the Kennedy assassination because that's all they were talking about.
That's right.
Okay. Unlike today, I know on 9/11, if you went to the major news channels or the major networks, they're all talking about 9/11, but you could always turn over to the Disney Channel, right?
That's right.
Or the Cartoon Channel or the Sci-Fi Channel, and you didn't have to watch about 9/11 if you didn't want to. But in 1963, that weekend, if you turn on the radio, TV, or read a newspaper, it was the Kennedy assassination. So we were all paying attention. And the thing that struck me right off was that weekend was the number of witnesses in Dealey Plaza who said that the numbers varied. Some people said there were as many as 6, 8 shots, maybe more. Others said there were 2 to 3 shots. And it kind of varied, but the consensus seemed to be that there was a shot.
Do you suffer from chronic CFED or can't focus energy drain? Try over-the-counter Vibrant. One tablet contains the same caffeine as a cup of coffee, but without the calories or coffee breath. Vibrant. Caffeine, not coffee. Taking Vibrant may result in increased productivity and decreased dread in setting alarms. Unexpected enjoyment of the graveyard shift has been associated with Vibrant. Vibrant may be a better budget option than drinking coffee. It may also decrease the urge to doze off, skip work, or exhibit signs of slacking. All jokes aside, always read the label, take only as directed, and limit caffeine as it may cause real side effects. Not for children under age 12.
And then a pause, and then 2 shots, pow, pow, right on top of each other. And this is pretty much what has been established to this very day. Okay, now at that time I was in Texas, and I had bolt-action rifles. I'd been deer hunting, and I knew that you can't get a bang-bang with a bolt-action rifle. You have to cock the bolt, eject the empty shell, load the new shell, push the bolt down before you can pull the trigger. So the best you can get with a bolt-action rifle would have been a pow, pow, pow. And when they said there was a pow, pow, then that immediately kind of raised the red flag for me. And in fact, in later years, I interviewed a friend of mine, Jim Wright, former Speaker of the House.
Oh, yeah.
And he had been riding in the motorcade right behind Kennedy, and he told me the same thing. And he was a hunter. He knew guns. He said there was a shot and a pause, and then pow, pow, 2 shots right on top of each other. Well, right then I knew, wait a minute, you just can't do that with one person and a bolt-action rifle. But back then, Doug, we were all much more naive. We trusted the government. We believed in the government. We had all just come off of World War II. We thought, you know, we were God's gift to the world. We stood for freedom and democracy. And so I couldn't believe that, it didn't settle with me, but I really didn't have anything to put in its place. But I began to keep up with the evidence. Now, we could spend this whole program on the Kennedy assassination, so I want to try to close this off, but I want to hit 2 or 3 little bits of evidence that you and your audience may or may not know that I think is very, very relevant.
Sure.
First off, on the Monday night after the Friday assassination, the district attorney of Dallas, Henry Wade, was holding a news conference, and he kind of blurted out, he said, have I mentioned we have his fingerprints on the rifle, Lee Harvey Oswald. We've got his fingerprints on the rifle. Well, that pretty well cinched it in everybody's mind. You know, he's got to be guilty. His fingerprints are on the rifle.
Right.
But now let's look the very night of the assassination, against Texas law, against any common sense. There was pressure from Washington on the Dallas police to turn over all the evidence they were collecting to the FBI, and they had it shipped to Washington. Chief Curry said, well, how can we conduct an investigation if you're taking away all our evidence? He said, but finally they were pressured by people in Washington, and they caved in, and they sent all the evidence to Washington, D.C. The next day, on Saturday, the 23rd, I have a copy of the document signed by J. Edgar Hoover himself that states no usable fingerprints were found on the rifle or even the inner parts of the rifle. On Sunday morning, we have the transmission slips showing the rifle was sent back to Dallas. On Monday morning, two FBI agents, Harrison and Vincent Drain, carried the rifle to Miller Funeral Home in Fort Worth, where they were preparing Oswald's body for burial. Paul Grudy, Groody, was the funeral home director and had, and in a few years had become a very good friend of mine, because as a police reporter for the 4-Star Telegram, he was running the ambulance service. So anytime there's a wreck, an accident, plane crash, shooting, and an ambulance is involved, then, there I am trying to cover the story, and I'd end up talking to Paul Grudy. And he was a fine gentleman, a honest and really great guy. And he told me that he was there when the FBI agents put Oswald's dead hand on the rifle. And he said that, in fact, he had trouble getting the black fingerprint ink off of Oswald's dead hand in time for the burial that afternoon.
Wow.
So, as you can see, the evidence was fabricated.
Oh, sure.
Now, that's number one. Number two, we have autopsy x-rays and photographs now that seem to indicate that he was shot from behind, as the official story says, blah, blah, blah. The fact is that Gerald Custer is the man. He's not a writer. He's not a conspiracy theorist. He is the man who took the x-rays of President Kennedy's head, along with Floyd Reeby, who was the photographer at Bethesda Naval Hospital, who took the autopsy photographs, which are now being shown to us in the National Archives. Gerald Custer said there was no damage to his face or the part of the skull that is shown in the x-rays in the National Archives today. And he said, quote, "These are fake x-rays," end quote. A very respected doctor, Dr. David Mantic, has examined those x-rays and also concluded that they have been fabricated. All right? Floyd Reeby, the photograph, who took the photographs of Kennedy's body during the autopsy, said, quote, "The ones in the National Archives today are phony and not the photographs we took." Okay?
Wow.
So, now, again, to show the cover-up that has taken place, I interviewed the surveyors who had surveyed Dealey Plaza first for Life magazine. They were hired. Bob West was the county surveyor of Dallas County, and his friend and associate Chester Brenneman. And they were hired on the Monday following the Friday assassination